presentations. And our usual webinar, PAK webinar of monthly webinar, will be on the 25th of June. So at the end of the session today, I will share more details on the series of webinars on positive aging. It will not be on Zoom, it will be on Team, Microsoft Team. So take note of that and the details. So welcome those who are joining us from wherever you are across the globe. Yeah. So welcome. Good evening, everybody from Nairobi. Wherever you are, you're welcome to this webinar. Today's webinar is on positive youth development, and our speaker is Dr. Anish Kumar from India. As you know, those of you who are regular for our webinars, every month on the fourth Wednesday of the month, we host a free webinar, which is the initiative of Positive Psychology Association of Kenya. And we bring in speakers from across the globe who are well-published, great scholars in positive psychology. And as you know, positive psychology is a very practical part of psychology, and its theories are very, very applicable to whatever profession you are in. And today we are talking about positive youth development. So I can see people are joining in. We have right now 34 people. And when we hit like around 40, we are going to start the session. We will start by introducing the speaker of the day, a well-established scholar of positive psychology. Yes, thank you very much. Those who are... So as we wait, can you text us from where you are joining? Where are you from? And I know I can see people that I know who have joined from outside Kenya. So as we wait, can you text a greeting on the chat box? And chat box is also going to be a way you can ask your questions. Yes, and usually our webinars are very, very interactive. And so I will be reading out. Okay, there's one Sister Teresa from Dubai. Oh, great. And somebody from Nyeri. Nyeri is still in Kenya, but outside Nairobi. Yes, Catherine. And Catherine is one of our trained character coaches, a very active one. Yes, so please keep texting. Let us test if you are... yes, Alfred is joining from Tanzania. That's interesting. Of course, Anish is from India. Dr. Carol Chakua, our chairperson of the Positive Psychology, has joined from Eldoret, Kenya. And Sonu Mary, I guess she must be associated with Christ University, has joined us from India. Yes, Munira from Nairobi. Munira was the first one to join this webinar. Yes, and somebody is joining us from Kericho, that is Janet. Welcome. And others from Nairobi. Yes, Rhoda from Kisii, still in Nairobi, still in Kenya. Okay, so people are joining in. Yeah, so thank you very much. And even as you listen to the speaker this evening, you are welcome to keep texting, and don't worry about being that you are not going to be a distraction. Your chat messages will be read out from time to time. Somebody has joined us from Nyahururu and Maua. I guess that's Maua near beyond Meru. Wow, Julienne is from Uganda, joined us from Uganda across. Sorry, you had lost me there. I think there was a problem with my internet connection. So I was introducing you to our speaker. So I have personally known Dr. Anish for some years now through a book project that he was editing. And we had contributed a chapter from Nairobi, and that's how I know him. And so he's a well-published author, over 40 pieces of peer-reviewed articles and book chapters, edited books. Currently, I know he's also editing another book to which I have contributed a book chapter. He has won several grants, including Templeton Foundation, from Templeton Foundation for research on gratitude. And he has also won a grant from UK's Research and Innovation, UKRI, and collaboration with Buckinghamshire University. So, my dear friends, today we have this renowned speaker. As people join in, we welcome them, and without wasting more time, I invite Dr. Anish Kumar to take the floor. Dr. Anish Kumar, you are welcome. This is our positive psychology webinar, and we hope more people will join in as you speak. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you can be heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sahaya, for that kind words of introduction. It's my honor to be with all of you today and share a few things and probably have some discussions around that. I have put in a PowerPoint so I'll just pull that. I hope the slides are visible. Okay. As Professor Sahaya has mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about positive youth development. And I guess that we mutually decided the title for this session. And I thank Professor Selvam for helping me title the session and give some insights about how I should go about. As As I'm going to talk a little bit about positive youth development, I thought it's important to also tell from where I come from. I work at Christ University, Bangalore, India, and my background has been in the area of child and adolescent development. I've more worked in the area of developmental psychology. Primarily, my work has been in the area of child sexual abuse, trauma, and related work. For my doctoral work, I worked with the adverse childhood experiences and WHO. From there, as I moved to teaching, and through my last 13 years of teaching and administration, I've moved my lenses from a more deficit approach to a more strength-based approach, basically through my interaction with students, research, and supervision. I currently work as an associate professor in the department, and I also am the director for the Holistic Education and Development Cell at the university, where the university places high emphasis on young people developing values and civic responsibilities. As Professor Saha has mentioned about my research, I work in these areas of youth, school mental health, and parenting. I'm a parent myself, so a lot of things that I have reflected upon is also from me being a parent and some of the doubts and confusions that most of us as parents go through. Once again, thank you for the opportunity. I try to speak for, I think we have 90 minutes. I'll try and wind up in 60 minutes and then probably leave some time for Q&A and discussions. What I've looked at today is to primarily understand youth and how have we looked at this word youth and what is this concept of positive youth development. How do we look at components of positive youth development and probably look at some ways through which we can foster a positive ecosystem for young people to thrive and flourish? A few disclaimers, as always, is one is that we are, as most of you here are experts in positive psychology, we understand that, ideas and thoughts about positive psychology are largely process and more not about the product. So it's a lot about, different ideas put together. And hence, my session may have limitations about how I have viewed these topics, and probably some of you might be experts and you might have different opinions and viewpoints around that. I have tried to balance the presentation, knowing that some of you are professionals, some of you are academicians, some of you are students, and some of you are probably interested in positive psychology and not directly from psychology. As a faculty or a practitioner, but you work in youth development at the various competence. So I've tried to balance the presentation with a little bit of research and some examples and thoughts to make it more easier for us to follow. I have used pictures and images here and to reduce the cluttering of that. The citations of them are given towards the end, but none of it intends to communicate any bias or harm or any kind of prejudice there. So let's look at. So I wanted to start the session with probably this quote that I see no hope for the future of our people if they are dependent on the frivolous youth of today. And it's in and the most interesting thing here is that it's said in 8th century BC. The thought here is that, when we talk about young people in our society and when we reflect about current young people, we think that, probably they are incompetent, probably they are immature, probably they have different sense of understanding which is different from ours, and we always have this friction. And it's not new just to the generation that we are. It's it's been there for generations. Any generation has always had a friction between the young generation and the older generation, and that's how revolutions have come across. That's how change has come, and that's how many movements have been. So if we look at current generation young people with whom we are probably working with, we are thinking about, we are researching, we are teaching, we see a huge generational gap between adults and the young people in that generation. Probably slight different from earlier generation is that this gap is quite widened. This gap is probably quite very demarked in terms of like, very clear, very evident. And it's probably raising a lot of confusions as to how we prepare to work with the generation that's going to be leading the generations that's going to come. Are we creating right opportunities? Are the youth competent to take up the responsibilities of the upcoming generation? So if we reflect together, when we think about our current generations, if you want to like share it in the chat, what do you think about the current generation, young people? I've just put some questions. Need not that we need to answer all these questions, but I've tried to like reflect about these questions throughout the session. But just to put it up front, I've just put them here. Like, it's becoming harder for young people to bounce back after setbacks. And why is it that it's becoming harder for them to bounce back? It's also that, psychologists, academicians, parents, leaders find it very hard or challenging to work with young people. Why is it that it's becoming more challenging to work with young people? What kind of changes are we as adults, we as practitioners, we are academicians, we as researchers making to relate to the current generations? What and how can we help and improvise? And can we empower each other? Can we work together? What are ways that we can work together? So, if you have any thoughts before we proceed further, we can pause for a minute and probably you want to share some thoughts in the chat. I welcome you, but I know like uh, you, I'll just wait for a minute if there are any thoughts and then I'll move forward. Probably some thoughts would come in as we move forward, but feel free to share your thoughts in the chat or towards the end of the session. So, moving forward, why do youth matter or why do they matter? We understand that, we are working when we're talking about young people, youth, we are talking about a particular time or a critical developmental time zone that young people develop or young people are in. So we are talking about people who have just crossed their adolescence or their late childhood, adolescence, and probably moving forward to their adult life. So it's like a sandwiched period in that developmental zone where they are neither adolescents, children, they are not yet adults yet. So it's a very changing, very dynamic, moving phase in their developmental zones, and that's very critical. And these transitions and challenges, like including the pandemic, has put a lot of demands on young people. So though we like probably think that it's like 5 years that we all have like seen pandemic, and there's already a group of a generation that has not seen pandemic, and then pandemic has become part of history. Now, you know that there are a lot of changes that the pandemic has brought in, and especially like, discussions about around mental health, workplace shifts. Like, it would not, though webinars were still there, I think it would not have happened so easily as we are doing it today. So they're on a journey of exploration and experimentation. So if you ask me, how do I look at young people? Young people move. So adolescence is like towards like, just moving, finish like puberty and some of that. And young people are towards the end. Youth is somewhere partially beginning there and then partially towards their adult life. So it's quite a long time, but then it's quite critical because why, they're in a journey of exploration and experimentation. And three major things. One is exploration about themselves. We say identity, exploration. And identity exploration includes three things. One is about identity formation in terms of sex, sexuality, gender, and gender identity. And the other is probably career and career related crisis, confusion, and exploration. And the third major aspect being philosophical, ideological, political thoughts around. So that means what am I doing? Where is my voice being heard? What am I doing? And what counts and what accounts are key questions. Like, we pat at the back of a young student, an undergrad student, and say, you enjoy your undergrad, you have 4 more years to graduate, and then probably you think about career. Probably for us, as when we were in our youth, it was okay because the kind of jobs that we were probably, or kind of careers that we were training, were more or less quite very crystallized. We were probably trained as, we would do a training on teacher education, and we would work as teachers, we would retire as teachers. We would train ourselves to become an accountant, and we probably work as an accountant. We get married and probably have children and rear a family. But then all of these systems have quite become complex, so hence no one knows what's the future of family. No one knows what's the future of work. No one knows what's the future in itself is. So probably the best time to work or prepare them for future is now. So it's like when I talk to young people about sex education, I ask them, when is the best time to talk about sex? Is probably before you go out and try one. When is the best time to talk about parenting? Is before you choose to become one. The best time to talk about marriage is before you get married, right? So youth is actually a good time for exploration and experimentation, and we need to probably think about what counts and what accounts in a youth life. So to just define this phase of life, and a lot of researchers, a lot of classic work, and I come from developmental psychology background, and you probably see that throughout the presentation. Some of this is very basic for psychology faculty. It's like, youth is probably not a very new term. When we look at youth, is probably we look at it from an identity work from Eric Erickson, where he looks at youth as a young adult. And he's coined the word young adult, and he talks about moratorium, identity crisis, and he talks about an identity crisis, about ego identity or identity development, where you're looking for a kind of intimacy versus isolation, and so kind of relationships, kind of future meaning in what who am I. Whereas the word youth comes in late 90s as an age of post-adolescent work, and I'll come that to the next slide of where the word youth comes from. And the word currently, which is interchangeably, also I read in a lot of articles as well as published work, talks also about this word called emerging adult, which comes from Jeffrey Arnett's work of emerging adult, and trying to see how this age group between 18 to 30 are young adults, but they are not yet adults, but they are emerging adults. And all of these things have a very cultural meaning, have a very historical meaning. If you look at where they come from in the early 1960s to 2000, the kind of cultural shifts, the kind of demands that we've required as a society has also changed the way we look at this group of people that we have. The word youth is quite very become very popular through Kennethston's work. Kenneth Kennethston, in his work on youth and as the rise of opposition, is quite in literature where the word youth has been very evidently used. And it's interesting that Kennethston speaks that youth is a rise of opposition. So that means if there is opposition, if someone has to bring in change, if there is a radical movements, youth is that group. And he labels this group as Phibia's youth, opposition, and then he discusses a lot about that. But you will see that youth is seen as change. Youth is not seen as stagnant or non-moving. So that's interestingly how literature and how psychology has looked at youth. To give a little bit more detail, more into a developmental lens of how we probably look at this transitioning, moving phase of youth, is that we need to look at the trajectories matter. That means the path that an individual from the early stages of development take would largely determine how they as young people are, and would also determine how they as adults would be. This has been classic developmental psychology studies look at, like, the path of development. So how the young people are is probably how they have got their experiences in their childhood. But there's interestingly another way to look at it. How young people get the experiences in during that youth stage would also determine how they as adults would be. So as much as most of literature or a majority of literature in psychology frames this period of adolescent or the phase that we are talking as developmental crisis, that any literature on adolescent would start as adolescence is a time of stress and storm, and it's a lot of up on like a pent up emotions, it's a lot of crisis, and it's studied like young people are at risk and a lot of challenges that they would have. So I'm drawing here your attention to what's called as this developmental trajectory as a sensitive period in life, and any individual in this develop any stage in developmental trajectory, provided if you look at the green, blue, and the red. So the green is that if young people or individuals are provided with nurturing care, good environment or safe environment, resources, they probably would develop as healthier adults. And unaided development, inadequate care, all of these would determine your path. The kind and the main determining aspect is the sensitive window, and developmental psychologists look at prenatal infancy and childhood as the sensitive window. But there is also studies on adult development that says that this phase that we are talking about as late adolescent to adulthood is the second most phase where the next curve of development can be determined, and similar determining trajectories can be drawn as to how you would be an adult. So it's the time that you can reframe your identity, it's the time you can actually think about what am I doing with, and it's the time that you start evaluating about how others mean to me. So if you're looking from a very Ericksonian point of view, Erickson says that in the first four stages, your external environment determines how you would be, whereas the next four stages is about how you evaluate how your external environment is to you, and your interpretation of that largely determines your further development. So this adverse life events, trauma, all of that has key impact on any individual's development. But it has key impact on young people, and that's a lot of literature that's already available. Classic work like Adverse Childhood Experiences by the CDC and many others who have done longitudinal work in risk behaviors always consider youth adolescent as peak at risk time of high risk behaviors like abuse, risky sexual behavior, violence, suicide, many of that. So there's a lot of available literature around how this period in life is a very risky, very stressful, very challenging stage in life. And there's also literature that talks about how the youth who engage in risk behaviors would develop into adults who are problematic, who are probably having mental health, developmental deficits or challenges, disorders, or behavioral outcomes. This is the classic adverse childhood experiences work. I've given the citation if that's new to you. But then if you look at that, these life experiences at this adolescent youth stage can determine how they can buffer these adverse life experiences. So the interesting thing is that it's not just that, there's also literature that not just that all young people who have had adverse life experiences would develop into risk individuals, or would commit suicide, or would have poor health outcomes. They're at risk, but there are buffers that can actually prevent young people from developing into at risk or from developing poor health outcomes. And that's what positive, well, that's why the aspects of positive psychology comes in, like resilience, or positive environments, nurturing environments, good health facilities, mental health facilities, or whatever, depending upon the outcome that we are looking at. So the risk is not just for the individual, the risk is for the larger community with whom the young people are, and with whom the larger community will be in care of. That means the youth would be then taking care of the larger community. So it's like a vicious cycle, a transgenerational cycle of parents. So youth who are victims are at higher risk of being perpetrators, right? So today, the youth who are at risk probably would become parents, or would become leaders who may be at risk of being perpetrators and abusers. So the thing is that we need to break this chain, and we need to break this chain from allowing this generational cycle of abuse from continuing. And so, if we have to break this chain, we need to look at some of these things about building, restoring, and strengthening the young people's mental health resources. And that's where our materials, that's where our strengths in positive psychology, or that's where positive psychology and concepts in positive psychology are really useful, or probably the main aspects. One of the thing here is to look at is that it takes a village. It's about building an ecosystem together. It's about building an ecosystem together, where this we provide the environment for young people to flourish, grow, and thereby they create, or they continue, and they foster a community that flourishes, thrives, and goes in. So, to coming to this concept of positive youth development, and here, this youth development framework that I am referring to here, there are many positive youth development frameworks, and I've used Leonard's 2005, later modified 2012, 13 model of positive youth development by Leonard et al., Jacqueline Leonard and colleagues, where they use the 5 C's model to the 6 C's model. Here, as we discussed so far, we spoke about how this stage in life is quite deficit stage in life and a problem stage in life, and probably positive psychology concepts like resilience can help. Leonard et al., or Leonard and colleagues, in their work, try to provide a framework of understanding this aspect of how do we go about doing this. Here, Leonard, using this informed by this relational developmental systems theory, look at this concept of developmental assets. That means all young people have strengths, all contexts have strengths as well, and these strengths are resources that be used to promote positive youth development. That means young people have positive aspects. The context in which they are developing also has a lot of potential, and we need to probably leverage these positive aspects to promote positive youth development. It clearly emphasizes the role of systems in youth development. So Leonard, in their work of the 4H longitudinal study, I guess that's the 10 years longitudinal study about youth development somewhere around 2012, 13, try to look at how youth development framework would look like. So a positive experiences with positive relationships and positive environment would contribute to a positive youth development. So in Leonard's framework, starts with the classic framework of Bronfenbrenner's ecosystems framework. What Leonard and colleagues are trying to tell us that this ecosystems framework has a lot of potential. Bronfenbrenner's ecosystems framework, classically developmental theorists would use it to understand what are risk factors, what are probably why is a child not developing, whereas Leonard looks at that as a very strong potential. That means every system in which the individual youth is developing has a key contributing factor to the youth's development. So you have a positive family member, the person can be a mentor, person can, so if you look at how did you develop who you are, how have you been successful in your life, you have stories to tell. There are individuals in your life who have actually contributed to who you are as a person, um, successful person, in terms of career, in terms of the values you hold, in terms of how you lead your life. And this come through systems like probably your family values, probably the religion you follow, probably to the kind of community you belong to, the school you went to, probably the kind of then existing legal school educational systems, the kind of culture. So let's say a person growing up in Nairobi would be different from a person growing up in, let's say, another part, or probably in India or US or UK, and that culture contributes to that formation of that person, the time period, the chrono system. So all of these systems have a positive element to contribute to that person. So if you look at the right hand side picture is what Leonard is trying to probably talk to us and say that, these childhood experiences, teachers, social networks, school staff, community members, all of them contribute to an individual's character, confidence, connection, all of these elements that make them a positive youth. This is the framework, or this is the crux of the framework that Leonard and colleagues propose as in the 5 C's model of positive youth development. So what they're trying to say is that youth strengths, that means the individual, so they're not leaving out the individual and the ecosystem. So those two things interact, and these two things over a period of time, with the kind of opportunities of confidence, character, caring, connection, and competence, opportunities that the individual get would develop into contribution and reduce negative behavioral problems. So it's a very simple model that's proposed, and it's a wonderful model. It says that you have a individual, you have an a youth who is living in a particular community, and that individual is a living individual with his or her, or the individuals, their own strengths, kind of the way they look at living in a kind of community, family, school, the kind of opportunities, goes through over a period of time these experiences. Like they have caring adults in their life. They understand what's caring. They have someone who, or they have opportunities to reflect on connection. They have meaningful connection. They build confidence, their character, their moral values. So they get opportunities in their life either through education, through experience, through adults, and thereby they develop this aspect of contribution. That means contributing back, their responsibility, their behavior changes. And through these experiences, also, that's buffers them from developing risk youth to then reduces that buffer from them developing from a risk, let's say being an abusive adult or being a drug addict or being a bully or being whatever negative behaviors. And that's because of these kind of 5C experiences that they get during their youth time. So that's how thriving, flourishing trajectory would look like. So resilient pathways, that Leonard's, the words like resilient and flourishing is not just an outcome, it's this process that this individual, so that we have individuals. So if you look at a community, we do not have individuals that all are healthy individuals. If we have a healthy growing adult, provide them with provided with all positive experiences, would go for a thriving trajectory, which is the first path, because the individual has less negatives experiences, more positive experiences, and then grow. But if you have an individual who's experiencing a trauma, who's gone through very adverse life experiences, your positive interventions, positive exposure would help them to recover. That's recovery through growth. So they would take more time, but they would still come back. And whereas no experiences in invulnerability, but then to be in that state of invulnerability, you require buffer zones as well. Whereas the other two talk about how you actually become vulnerable, dysfunctional, or lost because over a period of time because of no positive or protective factors in your life or in your life experiences. So to come with this model of, or to talk about more about this model of positive youth development, Leonard talks about 6 C's. It's competence, connection, character, confidence, caring, and contribution. These are the 6 C's. So initially, the model was about 5 C's. And then in their later work, they add this word contribution. Though, if you see, contribution was there in their earlier work as an outcome, but also that contribution is a dynamic aspect that, I contribute. And if I get contribution experiences, that can also contribute to my personal development or youth development. That means, like, let's say if you have young people who experience, who contribute to their voluntary experiences, they themselves grow through that experience. So that's why this contribution then became the 6th C element there. So let's look at each of these aspect, and I have cut to just I know online sessions can be sometimes really tiring and looking at the screen, so I've tried to keep minimum thing. So let's look at this aspect of competence. Competence is an interesting aspect because, and I was using this picture when I was addressing my faculty. Just we started 2 weeks back, that, how teaching, learning, and what's working. And I thought this is probably less, as adults we say, we've done the best. As a parent, I would say I've done the best for my child. As a teacher, I would say I taught the best positive psychology course last semester. But the competence is, as what we are talking in youth development, is the competence that the youth with whom we have working has developed. It's not our competence. It's not our competence to mentor. It's not our competence about knowledge. It's our competence here is the competence that the young person has developed over a period of time or through our opportunities that we have created. So competence here in this framework talks about 5 major competence, like mental competence, social competence, educational competence, vocational competence, and cultural competence. These are resources. If you have read Barbara Fredrickson and others, you will see that they are called as 4 major resources: psychological resources, social resources, relationship. So this competence is about that, your culture competence. That means you're sensitive through to the kind of culture you belong to. You know what works in your community. You do not just take the knowledge and apply it in your culture. You know what's the kind of culture. You're sensitive to the culture. You're competent in your cultural understanding, your vocational understanding, your exploring understanding through your probably internships or probably whatever the curriculum that's demanding. Educational competence is basically learning, probably a graduation or probably any kind of degrees or training or anything, like, you learn to cook. That's a competence. So that's competence is basically that, you mentally feel that, you have built that skill, you're able to do that. And you feel that the feeling of competence allows the individual to use that competence. Unless you feel competent, you won't do. So let's say if you can make uh, a juice and you feel you're competent in doing that, you want to teach it to someone, you want to use it again and again, and you want to stand. So let's say you learn something new, and that's where, when you feel you're competent, you want to also share it with others and build. So building young people's competence is very important, because only then they would contribute back, or only then they would explore further into that. So that's why competence in education, competence in social interaction. So nowadays children are very competent in dealing nets, Instagram or Facebook, and real person competence is really low. So
that's because they feel low in competence. They don't want to do anything that has to do with real time. They want to do more of virtual time, right? So building of that competence is what here it talks about. The second thing is confidence. Confidence is a very tricky thing to talk about in terms of confidence. Is here it talks about, when we talk about youth, and whenever I've spoken about youth, and a lot of adults say, no, they have not confidence, they are overconfident sometimes, or they are not confident. It's always overconfidence. Confidence here comes from very identity work. That means, I feel I am able to do, I feel I am worthy enough, I feel I can do it. And that's different from competence. Competence is the ability. Confidence is my innate, my feeling that I can do. So let's say, I feel I may be good. Let's say I have a competence to sing, but I don't have a confidence to sing. I think I'm not a good singer. So the confidence is that I feel that I'm able to do that. So I'm able to regulate. I'm able to self control. And my self efficacy are aspects that contribute to my confidence. That means, I know the situation. I know what I can do. I know what is my capability of doing. I can control. I can wait for turns. I can regulate. I can co-regulate. And I know that I can multitask, or I can take up this task. This task, I probably need collaboration. This task probably is not something that I'm competent. I need to build competence. So, to build that, young people need opportunities of confidence. So confidence as simple as, like, someone who is a student and probably doesn't is hesitant to do speak in front of class. You create those opportunities for that person to probably speak in class with a comfortable group, maybe a sentence or two, and then you increase the opportunities and build that competence, because you are able to emotionally regulate. That person knows, like, I'm anxious. Why am I, when am I becoming anxious? Why am I? So that confidence that, I can take up task, I can take up a movement, whatever, then in future they would be able to do. So the third C is connection. Connection is one of the key C's that's probably missing, among young people. A lot of research, or need not be just research. If you go to a classroom and probably reflect back as to how you were a student to how students are today, you would see that this connection aspect has very strongly changed. When they are in a classroom, they are like, or when you're seeing students as a group of young people hanging out together, they are like, they are hugging, they are like, they are cracking jokes, they're together. But there's the next day, if someone in that group is missing, they probably are not very or something happens, they're probably not sure what's happening. Is the person who's sitting next to them, what are they feeling, what is that person going through? But if you look at the connections that you made in school, if you look at the friendships that you've made in your youth, they've probably very deeper connections. Probably today you may not speak to them on a day-to-day basis, but there's a deeper sense of understanding. You respect them, you accept them as a person you are. These connections are deeper. The connections with parents and children, the parent and youth connection, the teacher and youth connection, the community and youth connections, they are probably superficially connected. For probably it's more like a customer and service kind of a connection. So we are here in positive youth development looking at deeper connections of socialization opportunities, where parents, teachers, peers get those opportunities to socialize and form deeper connections. Like one of the examples comes from attachment itself, right? You as parents are busy, they think that, put in best school and the child would develop best. So from there itself, they have lost out some of these key connections about attachment and, secure base or whatever those early forms. So as young people are developing, they need that time. They need adults who can probably demonstrate, help them socialize with how connections are built, how probably these deeper senses. So if you work with an adolescent or a youth, you will find that, someone told me that nowadays young people don't have filters. They just come and share whatever they are. But we would not have done that. We would share with someone who we trust. The problem is that these connections have become rare. these adults have become rare. So young people do not know whom to trust, whom not to trust. Young people do not have right people to talk. So probably the connections are key opportunities for working with young people. This is a very difficult topic to talk about, is character. Character takes from a very philosophical aspect, very moral aspect of character, from a very value aspect of character, and from positive psychology, it also takes in terms of that aspect of character strengths itself, right? So, character of a young person is a very difficult aspect to talk about. But interestingly, that's what we always look in the young person. What kind of character is that? If you are hiring a young person as an intern, and I see that now, the kind of people who are coming into the workforce, internships or colleges, the kind of values that they bring in. And that's what everybody is looking for. So someone was asking me in staff selection when I sit, what do you actually value most? I said, considering my last couple of years of experience, I would place that, their character, what they value, than what their degrees are. Like, if the person has the right attitude, right value driven, a faith driven, value driven attitude, then I guess the other things we can train. So young people need to actually be trained, nurtured about character. And character comes from a classic who, as example I've taken here, is like character strengths, right? Character comes from developmental assets and virtues. Character education is altogether like, can values be taught to young people? Shouldn't values be taught in school? No, values can be taught. You need to create those opportunities. Just that in schools, probably you are teaching in a developmentally appropriate way. You need to know what's a developmentally appropriate way to teach character in higher education. Like probably young people would build character by watching adults, by interacting with adults, by mentorship, by observership, by experiential learning. So character formation is key to an youth development. They need to understand who they are. They need to be nurtured into health, positive attributes of these character elements as well. The fifth aspect is caring. Caring has become a global issue. Interestingly, humankind, what are we caring? War, uncertainties, dilemmas, all of these things. Probably we thought, like, we've learned from our history and probably we would not repeat it. We see that history just keeps repeating itself a lot. So some of these things are caring for our fellow beings, caring for our own families, for caring for our own communities, is probably missing. We were like, we are training, a family is training, as a child, and probably putting all their resources as parents for the best of the child development, child to develop best of the schooling, best of the kind of opportunities for career. The individual becomes a very great professional, but forgets to take care of their own parents, but forgets to take care of their own communities, and they become like, earning money, best of that, but then what are they taking care of? Are they taking care of the society? Are they taking care of people themselves? Are they able to take care of themselves? Do they care for themselves? Do they care for spouses? Do they care for their children? So caring is another major aspect. And the last aspect in the model is about the contribution element. Contribution is something that I will talk a little more beyond this, just the 5 6 C's. Contribution is initially, as I said, was understood as an outcome of these 5C experiences. But unless young people get opportunities to experience contribution, like a volunteerism, or let's say a national or a countrywide service programs, or let's say at home doing daily chores, and they contribute to their meaningfully into their, so I would say those who have younger children, if you involve them and they feel they've contributed to cleaning up their house or in decision making of the family, they feel that they feel they understand connection, they understand caring, they build the competence, they build confidence, and thereby they contribute further. And that's the understanding of this aspect of contribution. So we've looked at this 6 C's of the positive youth development. And we will move to the last part of the presentation, but I know it's been like nearly 50 minutes. If you want to like quickly stretch yourself or close your eyes wherever you are, you can do that. So moving ahead, I'm going to take to the last part of the presentation, and I guess then we will have some time for Q&A. I've looked at this aspect of contribution and spoken, and I've shared a few thoughts. I'm sharing a few thoughts about how we can look at this aspect of contribution. Here in aspect of contribution, we are talking about young people as drivers of change. That's the contributional aspect. So youth, as much as positive youth development is adults' responsibility to create that opportunity. In that opportunity, it can be mutual, where young people can be mentored and you can be drivers of change. Any change, young people can think out of the box. They have that ability to come up with solutions. I have worked as a co-chair for the department for more than 10 years. Recently, I kind of switched my role, and I've worked with more than 3,000 to 5,000 undergrads every year. And it's like, when I'm sitting in a position where I'm the co-chair, and there are like conflicts between classes or conflicts with their faculty or something. And I would say that, what do you think? How do we resolve this issue? They would probably come up with a lot of innovative ways, and I may not agree with things, and they would know what works, what can we do different. They're quite innovative. They have, let it be technology, let it be thinking, they're quite sharp, able to do these things. Just that we have to tap it in the right way. They can drive change because they have that energy, that youthfulness, do many things. And how do we do that? In terms of using again another framework in positive psychology, we can look at the aspect of major elements of looking at the key element for any youth movements to be successful, or any young people to be successful as youth, is the presence of good adults. Adults in the community can never be ignored. If we are blaming young people, we are also equally responsible as adults. The dependable, supportive adults can mentor, nurture, or probably decide the future of any generation. So young people are very dependent on adults. Now the adults can like for example parents, strong parenting, mentoring, guidance, befriending initiatives or community initiatives. Wherever you create, you need adults who can be very strong pillars to mentor and guide young people. The second most important is the learning environment. By learning environment, I'm not talking about just schools. I'm talking about learning environments that you want your children, in your young people in your family, to be responsible young people. Then you need to create those learning opportunities in family, kitchen, in your dining rooms, in your family. You need to give them that learning opportunities in schools, character education, embedding that into as a culture of your college, higher education, or wherever you are, creating those ethos, curriculum, a positive behavior as not just as policies, as a culture. And that is how they are taught. So they're taught, or probably taught by teaching. I'm not talking about a chalk and board method. I'm talking about any kind of experiential learning model. Third is community partnerships. I said contribution. Community partnerships are being create those partnerships, like strong youth network services. You have, like, let's say decision making in schools. You have school councils, or you have so anywhere you create those partnership opportunities where communities, schools, family partnerships, or you create community organization and let's say family partnerships, or that partnerships with private public funding organizations, government and youth partnerships. However you create these community partnerships, create the opportunity for young people to build confidence, young people to watch good adults, young people to get mentored. And these are help them build that skills, confidence, or skills means competence and confidence that they require. The last thing is that as much as AI and technology is becoming the buzzword today, and probably we are very skeptical about where we are heading, peer help and social media can also be leveraged. You will see that good, strong movements, strong awareness about young people. You will probably using some of these things with young people. Like the other day, I was telling the class that, I do not know any of these Gen Z terms, but probably you know what's the alternative of what I say would mean in Gen Z, right? So you know what's the alternative. So you know how to speak to young people, what works with young people. Like, for example, if you are going to talk to a group of 8th standard or 7th standard students about drugs, it's very different from how and a youth would go and talk, and the impact they may have when they say that no, this is how things should be. That's and how they the peer-to-peer communication or peer education or peer mentoring or peer support groups work faster, because whenever a youth is in doubt, they do not go first to the adult. They go to their peers, they go to their internet, they go to their social media pages. So that's also another good sweet spot that we should blow up and use and leverage to its best. So to sum up, as adults, we need to first learn about young people. We need to learn about positive psychology. We need to probably live many of these things. If we want character, we want confidence in young people, we probably need to learn, live. We need to teach about it, and then we need to embed it. So we need to do with the head, heart, and hands. That means we need to use appropriately. Like an example, I would say that you want your students to be very ethical. I would say the student may be able to write a very good ethics essay using a chat GPT and give it to you, right? So you don't that's not ethical. They don't do not have ethics in their heart and ethics in their hand. They only have probably about ethics about how to write about ethics. So you want a young person to use head, heart, and hands is to probably embed many of these into their day-to-day life experiences. And that's how we hold hands together and create a positive ecosystem of fostering and flourishing. So if we have to build resilience and positive things, we have to do it in the organic way. And what I mean by organic way is that when you see those plants growing on the roadside and they flourish and thrive, probably you try to bring them in your own balcony or your gardens, they may not grow that way. So we need young people to be like resilient, like those trees and plants that grow by themselves, and they find the environment, they adapt to the environment, and they still flourish and thrive. We need to stay relevant as adults. So I'm not forgetting, we need to be updated. We need to stay relevant. We need to be staying relevant doesn't mean that we use the terminology. Like it's not that we talk like Gen Zs. Staying relevant is we know what Gen Zs want. We know how to work with them. We all are at the end of the day adults with our own challenges, the kind of life that we grew up, and trying to kind of nurture an extraordinary generation that's going forward. So if we are trying to train the young people for the next generation with the kind of standards that we set for ourselves, then we are probably creating a glass ceiling for our future itself. We are probably creating a glass ceiling for the generations to come. So we need to create these trajectories for young people to uh, grow, and probably just create those paths, and they should claim it, and probably they should know how to claim it because we've done the back end work for them. So if you have any questions, we can take in. As we conclude, if we are looking at this positive youth development, I've used this framework of it takes a village. That means every individual, every adult is responsible for positive youth development and youth in their communities. Values and virtues that we are talking about needs a very developmental and cultural lens. Collective wisdom of adults can do wonders, and together we create an ecosystem for positive youth development. That's it from my end. These are some of the references. Um, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Sahaya and the Positive Psychology Network. I hope I am within the time. Thank you very much. I'm just seeing the chat. Oh, there are a lot of wonderful thoughts here. Sorry, I could not read the chat while I was presenting. But if there are any questions, suggestions, thoughts, I'm happy to take. And I'm reading the chat.
Sorry, Adish, I hope you are able to hear us.
Yes, yes, Professor, we can hear you.
Okay. So there are a few questions on the screen. One person by name Ruto. By the way, our Kenyan president is also Ruto, but I hope it is not the president. And he says, thank you, Dr. Kumar. Talking about positive youth development, what could be the best way to address the youth situation, especially those influenced by the prevailing youth situation like the Gen Zs and polarized political situations with youth emancipation and change driven mentality, whereby the youth don't listen to any adult or any suggestions of the old generations. Yeah. So in Kenya, we have had a situation of Gen Zs going on the street last year, protesting, and some have lost their lives. Yeah. So I think. Okay, Ruto is pointing out that they are not responding to the adult. Any comments on that, Anish?
Yeah, that's a very thoughtful reflection as well. More than a question, I feel that there's a lot of reflection. I probably may not have one answer to that question, but seeing similar issues across the globe, we see young people in challenging situations which can be avoided if they probably have listened. One of the things we probably will have to understand that is, young people are probably very radical in their decisions. We say that even brain development, they're in that last cap of prefrontal cortex developing. One of the major thing I would say is that the kind of peers that they hang with, and I've seen some models where young people would listen to young people. So somewhere, if you have to buffer some of these things, you also need to voice the young people who are actually listening. They are minorities sometimes. It's like in a class, there are people who would speak and take the floor and make the decision and then say, this is what we feel. But there are quieter ones. There are also young people who are actually have strong voices, but they sometimes don't get positions. So sometimes adults should respect that voice and probably stand with them and probably create a parallel or a buffer voice as well. But I am not very strong if I've sure if I've given a right response, but that's what I think.
Yeah, and I think there is a second question related to the first question. So I go to the third question. What is the role or place of technological development and advancement in positive youth development? And I
Yes.
think you had made a comment about social media and things like that. Any further comment, Dr. Anish?
Yeah, that's also a very thoughtful question. Technology is going to be a reality. Like, for example, like how the AI and generative AI, many of these things are going to be a reality. Um, there is a limit to which we can refrain as adults from being with. So we need to, it's better to learn how to leverage technology, because technology is like a language, just like a language, rather than technology being everything. Right. So we need to understand technology is just a medium. As adults, we have that maturity. We've seen beyond. We are almost a generation that's grown up with technology, starting from a dialer phone to a normal phone to smartphone. We've seen the generation of technology growing in. So we have a better understanding of technology is grow. We've seen technology growing along with us. So we probably need to understand that if we want to work with young people, we need to know what this language of technology looks like. And because we are matured in terms of understanding how, that, probably not smart as them to use the technology, but we know how to what is safer and what is not safer. So I guess technology would play a key role, because technology would help you communicate, technology would help you probably use better mediums, understand. So technology is going to be important, but we need to know how and when to use it appropriately. So technology will play a very key role is what I feel.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. So there is some request about the notes, and for the person who is requesting notes, just for you to know that this webinar is available on YouTube, our channel Positive Psychology Kenya. If you go to YouTube, you will find this recording. Uh, it is simultaneously live on YouTube, and then it will remain there as a recording. So Catherine comments on that. Why do we pathologize young people and infantilize and often sort of that dichotomous way of looking at youth and we adults or whoever. And that's an interesting comment to the previous question by Ruto. Yeah. So any comment, Anish?
So just to add on, we never it's not an impulse to pathologize or pathologize young people. I guess if I've tried to say that, then I'm sorry. But then the idea is that a larger framework of developmental psychology or historically has looked at it from a very deficit approach, and then you will see the strength. So my position, I was trying to position it historically that a deficit approach is very very evident. We need to break that chain and probably look at it from a strength based approach.
Yeah.
Catherine, that's a very valid point. We have actually failed as many work by probably looking at it from a very deficit lens, and a strength based lens is something that's probably going to be. So you are completely right. We never need to pathologize or undermine the power of younger people.
Yeah. So thank you. And then there are thank you notes. Yeah, thank you. The big takeaways as custodians of these young people, we need to be the good adult. We need to be open to learn. There is also a need to leverage on collective wisdom, and wisdom goes both ways. Thank you, Dr. Anish. Then Vivian says, I think in our workplaces, which nowadays are so intergenerational, we have almost 5 different generations, from baby boomers to Gen Zs. It's important to embrace the diverse reverse mentorship,
Yeah.
whereby the other generations can learn from Gen Zs. For example, technology stuff, the current lingo that they are using, integration within our work spaces. Yeah. So, yeah, that we can also learn from Gen Zs. That's a basic comment. Yeah.
We learn a lot of things.
Then,
I remember during the pandemic when I had to do online classes, a lot of things I learned from my students about, like, what are ways, like, what are different kinds of ways you can use technology, even like how you use Chat GPT. And I gave an assignment that, I'm giving you assignments of students which are done through Chat GPT. You need to figure out which one are genuine and which one are not. They could do it much faster using chatbot and many other things. So I think a lot of reverse you can use them to actually learn a lot of new things for yourself.
okay, there is a question I don't quite understand. Let me read it. Maybe others can understand. During your presentation, you mentioned that to make the best out of any information is when it can assist an individual to prevent undesired behavior from occurring. What can we do to resolve the negative experiences that have already been presented by our youth? Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know
If
if
I've
you get that.
Yeah, correct me if I've not got the question right. I understand that you are trying to say that, young people who have already had negative life experiences, how do you reverse it or how do you resolve it? I guess that's what I
Yeah.
mentioned in the presentation is more in terms of a recovery. That's how, like, you see a lot of these leaders, a lot of pioneers who have actually had hardships in their life. It's about that, youth, young people to adult life. It's not about just about the life experience, is my interpretation about life experience. For example, my mother was a full-time working woman. We were three siblings. The way I look at it is that probably, she was trying to work while trying to provide the best for us, and trying to, like, balance family, home, a lot of these things. And sometimes, sometimes my younger sister thinks that, she was not available and she was not working. She would be always there for all our parent teacher meetings. All others mothers used to come. Our mother used to not show up for some meetings. So it's about how you evaluate your life experiences. So it's for young people, it's the adversity. The recovery or resolution is that, as mentors, psychologists, therapists, whomever the person who is experiences trauma is working with, is to rephrase that experience, is to relook at the perspective change about what has happened, and how can I learn from that experience and recover. Like, an adverse life event is not something that none of us have. We have had adversities in life. We are not like protected from all kind of, we've seen even adversities, like, a war happening, though it might not be in our thing, it has affected like each one of us. So adversities are bound to happen. It's about how we develop that perspective, how we develop that lens to look at some of these things and build resilience over that. If I have understood the question correct, and I hope
Yeah.
that response makes some sense.
Then there is a comment about youth driving change, taking part in revolutions, especially in instances where the adults think business as usual and do not listen to the youth. Probably historically, revolutions have taken place when an adult understands the youth and comes up with their agenda as the point of change. Do you have examples? Okay. In Kenya's fight for independence, it was led by adults who spoke to the heart of the adults. Okay, so uh, any comment on that, Dr. Anish?
Yeah, almost all historical examples are by young people driving change. If you look at even in, like, let's say I'm thinking of Indian independence movements, you will see a lot of youth movements. Even current, one of the thing I'm also worried, or probably I'm interested to know more, is that, a lot of youth movements have shrunk. Young people are making comments on social media, but then the youth interest in politics have gone down. Youth interest. So if I ask my class, what's the political situation, comment about it. No, we are not very interested in politics. I would say that, it's not about your political stance. It's about politics. It's about, who is leading this country, who is in leadership, who is making decision. Don't you have comments about decisions made? No, probably no. Like, that doesn't matter to us. Anyways, we just follow. So I guess that's a sense of worry. So I guess good, we have seen a lot of examples of youth taking movements. Even in college, like where I work with, we have a student council, and student council proposes, and the way they propose it, it's very nice to see that, leadership in the university and students proposing. It's sometimes like there are frictions as well, but then, it's very beautiful to see how they come to consensus, how sometimes changes that we have not have had for years happens when young people move. It's not just about fight. It's also about being able to put the idea, pushing for that, trying to find all kinds of resources required. So I'm worried when young people are not interested in politics, when young people are not interested in where country and world is going forward to, and are not radical about it.
Yeah. So there are two comments about youth issues in the contemporary world. One is at the workspace, the young generation spending time watching movies, and there is another question about drug abuse. Yeah, and how positive youth development could respond to that, and what assistance can we offer? That type of a question, and in between there are thank you notes as well. Yeah, any comments about those sort of contemporary issues of the youth in general and positive youth development?
Yeah, so that's also a very applied question. I'm trying to think with in line with that question. To like, for example, drug abuse has been a very long-standing issue for our most of our communities. So you will see that there is also very strong association with the community. So when I worked with child protection, child abuse, you will see that in communities where violence were quite common, children were more abusive. They turned as abusive as family members. So risk no. So if you look at in a classroom when we do drug abuse prevention or to a community, not all young people are into drugs. Even if their peers are into drugs, they may not be. There may be people. So some of things that buffer is that their own strengths to what they value more in life. So they come that primarily comes from the kind of family experiences that they have, their ability to talk to others, their ability to reflect about it. It's not just the information that they have. So the kind of very strong family bonds. So I think drug abuse, like how it's discussed in family, how open, how parents, like I would say, a parent smoking and then telling the child, smoking is not that good. Though information wise, you have said what information the child has taken. It's like the same about mobile phone. We think that current generation is in mobile phone. The research says that parental phubbing is something that's closely related to internet addiction in young people. So, or young people watching others being completely engaged in internet is also a risk for them. So that's the limited response that I have, but I'm sure someone in this group might have more expertise. I've not worked with drug abuse in detail as well.
Yeah, great. I think similar to that, there is also a comment about or a question about violence in some societies.
Societies.
Yeah, and how it could. This environment of are violent and full of injustices. All leaders need to know their uncaring actions can wreak havoc to themselves and the future of their children. Yeah, so the cycle of violence, I suppose.
Violence.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The cycle of
Okay.
violence.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Over to you, Anish. Yeah.
No, that's
About
it.
the
That's it from my
violence.
end.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is a thank you note from Dr. Churu, who is also a member of the board of the Positive Psychology Association. Your positive and optimistic stance to youth is evident. Thank you. Yeah.
Father Selvam, can I say something?
Yeah. Yes, Munira, yes.
Yeah,
Welcome.
what I take from is positive experiences and fulfilling relationships. They help the youth develop positively. Now, there is hope for the people who have undergone trauma, because trauma alters the neurochemistry of the brain. When they've had trauma in childhood, it does alter the brain chemistry. So there was a research done at Kenyatta University, and what they found was that these university students had undergone ACE test. So they had 6 scores out of 10 in the ACE test. And what they found is because they had jobs, they were studying, so they had more positive experiences as adults. And that gave them a lot of hope. They had a lot of strengths. And that really helped them overcome the trauma. So that speaks a lot about positive psychology, how it really helps somebody. Even people who have gone through a lot of trauma in their lives can overcome it in adulthood. Nothing is lost. Hope is not lost. That's what I'm trying to say. So it acts as a buffer uh, or a protective factor to overcome stress.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I think we should wind up. So we thank Dr. Anish. Right now, it must be almost reaching 9 o'clock in India,
9:30.
or 9:30, yes, and late evening. So thank you very much for sacrificing your time to be with us. Definitely for scholars, younger scholars among us, your presentation has given a framework or several frameworks for research, and so we hope they will benefit from that. We all benefit from it, especially the 6 C's, the 5 C's, and the 6 C's. I think that's the greatest takeaway from this session. So once again, Dr. Anish, thank you very much for your availability. And thank you for talking to us about this very relevant topic of the youth. And from a positive perspective, how we can provide an environment and a support system in which they can develop positively. And particularly, though you briefly mentioned that the ecological systems theory of Bronfenbrenner, and I think there are different layers of influence that are happening on the young person. And I suppose as when they are younger, the parents have a greater influence. But as they grow, there are these macro levels and chronos systems that are constantly affecting them. And so how do we provide a positive environment across those layers of environment? Okay, so thank you very much. And uh, Dr. Anish is very approachable, though a very busy man, leading a very flourishing psychology department in India. One of the best universities, I must say, that I have visited, and I'm happy to acknowledge that I have given open lectures there. A very good environment for young scholars, I must say. Yeah. Thank you very much. And by the way, if anybody is interested in the Department of Psychology at Christ University in Bangalore, you're welcome to contact me. And I am in touch with the International Students Department of Christ University. The one in charge of the international students in Christ University had visited Nairobi some weeks back, and they are coming back in October. So if you want to study even a master's degree and research studies in Christ University in Bangalore, you are welcome to even contact me. I will put you in touch with the Department of International Admissions. Okay, so coming up in June and July is a series of online webinar on positive aging. So from youth to aging now. Uh, so four reflections or four presentations in this webinar series presented by me and Dr. Churu uh, with the collaboration of the Care for Aging Sisters Association of Kenya, which is part of the Association of Catholic Nuns in Kenya. And they are the ones who are sponsoring it and hosting us. But it is open to all. It's free. It will be on Teams meeting and also available on YouTube and the Facebook live broadcast. We share these links. We keep sharing. So take note of it. And meanwhile, on the fourth Wednesday of June, as usual, we will have our regular positive psychology webinar. So thank you very much, and thank you for being present, and spread word around. These series of webinars are really useful for scholars to get a glimpse of what's happening across the globe in research. And meanwhile, there are a lot of thank you notes, Anish, to you, that positive youth development really provides a hope and a hopeful language, I think. It is both enlightening and refreshing. And kindly leave your address. Anish, could you please? Yeah, okay, you have
Yes,
already
I have
texted.
shared. I've shared.
Yeah, thank you. Anish.kumar at
Christ University.
christuniversity.in. Okay, thank you. You can always get in touch with us at Positive Psychology about the previous speakers and particularly Anish Kumar of today. Thank you, Anish. I really appreciate
Thank you.
your time. I know you are
Thank
so
you. Thank
busy
you.
with your
Yeah,
teaching
thank you, Father
engagement.
Selvam, for having
Thank
me.
you.
I'm very
Yeah.
grateful to you for giving me this opportunity. As you've said, I'm grateful because you've evaluated one of my scholars' thesis. You've been very grateful. So this is very little that I could reciprocate back. But I'm really grateful for all of you for being with me for this session, and thank you very much for those kind words. It's a good opportunity to connect with people whom we probably may not meet in otherwise. So you're always welcome. If you're visiting Bangalore, India, you want to drop in, leave a mail to either Father Selvam or to me. We will probably help you in however ways we can. But wishing you all the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, well, we close the session and the recording will be available on YouTube. Thank you.